Hi everyone. I hope you guys had a great week, and today I will I have next to me in my coffee table Liz Lidstone. She's a dear colleague and dear friend, and we're going to talk about things not to say to disabled people. Hi Liz, how
Yeah,
you doing?
yeah, good, thank you.
So, let me start with a little bit teaser. Not long ago, I was one of those people who got upset of people pulling in the um, disabled parking spot, and I just walked out the car, and I was like, "Why is he guys parking on this parking spot? He doesn't look disabled." Little did I know back then, but it was not the only time. Um, when I grew up, we had a couple of people who were disabled in school, and in Austria, it was kind of like a taboo. Like you don't look at them, you kind of try to isolate yourself from those people because I felt uncomfortable because I didn't have a background or education how to handle those situations. And I know it's a simple because you and me and everybody just like regular people with disabilities, and I have disabilities, but back then I didn't know that my disabilities are not visible, you don't see them. But if I get stressed, I forget things. You ask me simple questions. What did you do an hour ago? And I'm like, I don't know. I have no
Yeah, I
clue.
get
I
that one.
have to think about it, right? And so if I'm going to a shopping center and I have to go in a shopping list, I will have a paper likely in my pocket if I remember that I put it in my pocket or didn't forget in the car. And I ask my wife to always send me a list of things that I have to buy because I will not remember by the end of the shop if I had everything checked and have to literally delete each one, right? Because obviously I forgot also my pencil. So, but the problem is bigger. It's not about me and not being educated. I didn't have the tools to educate myself. There was nothing there. And so when I met you a couple of months ago, I was like, holy bark, I need to talk to her without being afraid of being embarrassed of asking certain questions because I just want to know. And I think there are so many people out there, and trainers and professionals, and even regular people in a front circle who do not know how to talk to you.
Yeah,
So tell
and
me a
I think
little bit
that's
about
fair enough.
your background because you look totally normal.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's deceptive, and that was one of the things I wanted to talk about today. Is like you, I had no background or awareness about disabilities really. Um, I just, it didn't come up really. You didn't come across it unless it was directly affecting you or your friend or a family member. You're not really aware, and this information isn't accessible, and sort of it does lead to discomfort and embarrassment in public because you do come across disabled people, and if you're not kind of savvy and up to date on everything, you may feel uncomfortable and not sure what you can and you can't ask and what's too much, and or you may not even be aware that you're actually indirectly offending somebody through your language. So that's why I'm keen to do these talks and things, because I don't mind people asking me questions. I'm all about education, and until a few years ago, I really wasn't clued up or aware about anything really until it happened to me. Um,
What happened? May I
so
ask?
yeah, so 9 years ago, 9 years ago, um, okay, up to 9 years ago, I was active, sporty, getting really good grades at school. I had a kind of focus for a career that I always wanted to be in, and things were moving along smoothly. And then I had a horse riding accident, and it wasn't great. um, and I ended up with lifelong disabilities as a result, because I had a head injury and landed on my head. Um, and it left me with seizures. I've had seizures every day since. I've learned to deal with sort of chronic pain, chronic fatigue, severe memory loss. Like you, I can sometimes remember things that happened a couple of years ago or memories that stick in my head, but I don't remember whether I've just made my cup of tea or not, or I'll think I have and I'll go to do it, and then I discover that actually I put the milk in the cupboard and I didn't make my cup of tea because the tea bag's in the fridge. And I have no awareness that I've done any of this until I come back to the situation and find out what I've just done. So I do have memory problems too. And I spent a few years kind of adapting to chronic fatigue, chronic pain, exhaustion, and the seizures. And I was just sort of getting on top of that and learning to live with what was my kind of new normal. And then in 2019, my sight suddenly deteriorated very quickly. And as of 2021, I am now registered severely sight impaired, which is the fancy new term for blind. So although, as you say, I look normal, I look like there's nothing wrong with me, there's kind of a whole lot going on under the surface. And there's a lot of things going on in the background. But visually, if you saw me now, just looking at this picture, you don't see my white stick, you don't see the guide cane, you can't see memory loss, you can't see internal pain. And this is where I think a lot of miscommunication comes from with the public, because they see this, and before they see the stick or the wheelchair, if they don't see a visible sort of medical equipment or aid or assistance dog, you look kind of visually normal.
Mm-hmm. So even if you have a wheelchair, you use the wheelchair for a very long time, right? What was the things that people kind of like told you about the wheelchair?
So it took me a long time to accept the use of a wheelchair and a guide cane and all of my medical aids, because I was fighting it, because I had a stereotype in my head too, and I didn't want to be the girl in the wheelchair. And it took me a long time I fought, especially the guide cane. I didn't want to be that blind girl with a white stick. I didn't want to have that as the first thing that people saw and knew about me. Because, there's nothing like a big white stick that screams blind or sight impaired. And I didn't want that to be the first thing that people saw about me and made a judgment and a perception of me just based on that before they got to know me. So I had my own preconceived notions about medical aids and equipment, and I didn't want to use them. And it took a long time and a lot of supportive people saying to me, they exist to help you and they exist for a reason. That's why we have this medical equipment. It's there to help you.
But everybody's pointing the finger on it. Like, yeah, now you're separating yourself from the regular society.
Yeah, it was a big visual indication that I was disabled, and I wasn't ready for that. And once I started using them in public and things, and I've desensitized to it. I'm normal now. It's my normal. But you do still come across access issues and other people's perceptions and stereotypes and prejudice. I think particularly as a young person as well, because as you say, if you just see this bit, I look visually normal. And then if you see me sat in a chair or, walking along with a walking stick or a wheelchair, you then think it's understandable. I understand why people look at me and go, she looks normal. Why is she in that chair? Why is she using a walking stick? But the purpose of this talk is kind of maybe to dispel some of the things that people might think and say, or maybe educate people as to what is okay and what might actually be quite offensive to a disabled person. Because until a few years ago, I just didn't know either.
Yeah. I remember I injured myself on the job. I worked with a dog and I slipped and fell down and I injured my ankle. So I need to go to work because nobody else would work. So I had to go to work. And so I had to take my chances whether to walk to the client or cancel the client. So what I did basically on a daily basis, I tried to avoid stepping on my foot as much as possible. So I used those cars that you get in the supermarket on the wheelchair. Well, I had to get out of my car and I had to walk to get the wheelchair. And then once I get out of the wheelchair, I had to walk to my car because I didn't have a disabled parking lot. And usually I would get the parking lot somewhere else where the cart wouldn't reach. So I totally can empathize with that. Now, you have a dog, right?
Yes, I do. I have one Jack Russell and a working assistance dog.
Oh, you have two dogs.
Yes.
Now, one person would definitely ask the question, how can you handle those two dogs if you're not barely able to handle your daily things?
Yeah, so that's a really common question. And again, if people ask me, I don't mind. Like in this setting, I want to talk about it because I think people do have these questions, and that's normal and that's okay. Um, but again, just last week, I saw a comment from somebody online, and it was a lady who was looking to rescue a dog, and she'd said, I'm looking for a little dog which has low energy because I'm in a wheelchair, but I do have a garden. And, she listed some very nice qualities, and she sounded, for some dogs, perfect. But unfortunately, immediately, one man jumped on and said, how can you even think about having a dog if you're in a wheelchair? You can't even look after yourself. How can you look after a dog? Give this dog to somebody who can look after it. Um,
Wow.
and I was kind of shocked at such blatant ableism. And I actually started writing a reply to explain it all, but then I stopped and I deleted it because I thought, actually, this man has already got a very narrow-minded set opinion. He's not saying, do you think you can manage this? He wasn't saying to the lady as a constructive question, as a, have you thought this through? It was already a, I'm telling you as an able-bodied person, you can't have this dog, or you can't have a dog, you're not suitable. So I deleted my comment back to him, which was an educational one, because I decided that actually he has such a set formed opinion already of disabled people, and as an able-bodied person, that he wasn't going to listen or be willing to change his mind or be any more open-minded. So it would have been a waste of my time. And so you do have to pick your battles, but it just shows that there are people who do genuinely feel this and feel it very strongly, strongly enough to comment it to strangers on the internet. But in some ways, I understand it. So, as you say, I have two dogs, and I've just told you that I'm registered severely sight impaired or blind, that I'm a part-time wheelchair user, that I have multiple severe disabilities and medical conditions that I live with, and that I have to manage chronic pain and exhaustion. So yeah, as you say, some people will think, how can you manage a dog? And I manage two dogs and a cat.
And
But it's
people,
about
and you educate
people.
people. And I think sorry, I mean, I had to interrupt you here because I think it's very important for our viewers. You know, I don't see why you have to explain them that you can, and then not basically assume that you can. What makes them think that you cannot? Like their ability to care for the dogs will guarantee you, I would list at least 30 or 40 points that were failing their dog, most likely than you do, because they just don't understand the dog's needs,
No, I've
right?
met, yeah, like you, I've seen multiple homes where the people is to, a family, and they are all fully able-bodied and there are no health conditions, and maybe they just don't meet their dog's needs. I mean, you just have to look at rescues and shelters and places, and you see hundreds of dogs that haven't had their needs met. And you can't look at all of these dogs and say, oh, all of these dogs must have come from a disabled person. It's not reasonable. It's not the case. But I can say that as a disabled person, I probably do more than the average person to ensure my dog's needs are met, because I understand that I may have limitations, and so I have to put things in place to make sure their needs are met. So I have a dog walker, and she takes my high energy dog out to ensure that she gets plenty of exercise
Squeeze
and lots of
everything out of it.
stimulation. So I have a terrier and a spaniel. The spaniel is my assistance dog, and so once she goes out once a week with my dog walker, who's fantastic, and she effectively takes her for a bark in the park with all of her dog friends, and I know that she has all this time to socialize and just be a dog. And she comes back and she goes and she goes, "Good night, Mum, I'm going to bed now," because she's so tired and she's had a lovely time. And you can see that she's so happy. She just has that time out and she loves it. So that's once a week. She goes to a dog walker to make sure she sees other dogs and plays with them. And then I can say that I knew that I needed to meet their needs for walking and exercise. So my dogs have, at minimum, an hour of walking, between 1 to 3 hours every day of walking. And they walk in forests, they walk over rivers, in big open spaces. It's not lead walking, it's off lead, running around, getting to be dogs. And again, I myself am not personally able to do that every day for them. So I have people in place who do that for them every day, because I know it's important to meet their needs. So it's another example of I've had to change my lifestyle. It might be slightly different. I have people that walk my dogs for me every day, but it means that their needs are met. But I'm a disabled person and I can have dogs. So they have an hour minimum of walking every day. Then they come home and we will do specific playing exercises, training exercises. And then, of course, I've got one dog who is a working assistance dog. So she will also then do some tasking and working and maybe go out in public. And I've got a little elderly Jack Russell sat down by my feet. And he's recovering from a spinal operation. So he's actually doing physio multiple times a day. So actually, for a disabled owner, there's an awful lot going on to meet the dog's needs.
Well, having a disabled owner with dog with disabilities is kind of like,
yeah.
wow. Because
between the two of us, we've got a lot going on.
how do you feel that people, let's call it, positively discriminate you when you have regular access, like in a bank or going to a public place? I mean, I know there's a lot of inspirational porn out there, but how do you feel about that? Give me a couple of examples.
So the term inspiration porn, some people are probably thinking, what on earth is that? And it's a form of positive discrimination, and it's an unusual one. And the chances are, if you're actively engaging in this, you probably aren't even aware that your actions are positive discrimination. So
You
a good
just want to be
example,
nice, right?
you want to be nice and you're trying, and it's good. But so to give you an example, if I was in the shop, and it happens, say I was in the shop and I was picking up a bag of salad or whatever to put in my basket, and somebody comes over and they put their hand on my shoulder and they say, "I just want you to know that I think you're really inspirational." No,
You're my
really, you
hero.
are. You're really brave, and it's look at you out here doing your shopping and doing all these amazing things, because you are. And inevitably they look you up and down and say, well, with everything that's going on, so I just want you to know that you're so inspirational. And then they walk off. Now, I understand completely that what they were trying to do was be nice. I understand that and I get that. And what I will probably say is thank you, and I'll smile and say thank you, and they will leave. And they'll leave as a healthy, able-bodied person walking away going, oh, that was a really nice interaction. What a nice person. How clever they are for getting out there and doing all these things independently. And they walk off feeling all warm and fuzzy. Now, I'm left feeling quite sort of, ooh,
It's
about
a
the
violation,
situation.
basically, right?
It just makes you feel uncomfortable, because what's actually happened is this person has come over to make a point to single you out in the whole shop as a disabled person, to make a comment about how inspirational you are, and look at you going and doing all these activities that are normal. And so they might have meant it from a good place, but actually it leaves the disabled person feeling sort of a bit yucky inside, because it's uncomfortable. And they didn't go up to any other stranger in the shop and say, look at you doing your shopping like a good old adult. It's only the disabled person. It doesn't happen to anyone else.
I have a question here, please. And I don't know if anyone of our viewers is a veteran. I mean, I'm not saying all of them, but many of them have trauma coming back from war. and we come up to them, and because everybody has this, sometimes um, defined spots on the car, wearing a hat that they're veterans, and we're like, thank you for your service. It's kind of like a slippery slope.
Yeah.
I feel
Yeah.
sometimes great if people tell me, thank you for helping, rescue dogs. It kind of empowers me. But if somebody tells me, thank you for being awesome, even if you have ADD and you forgot to put your water down for your dog, um,
Yeah.
okay,
It's
what's going
yeah.
on
It's
there?
yeah. Sometimes you just for they could have come up to you and said, thank you for all your work with rescue dogs. They could have just left it there. They didn't need to incorporate the despite being disabled, despite having this condition, despite being different. That's where the line kind of blurs a bit, because
It's
they
a
could have
gray
just come over
zone,
and said,
right?
thank you for your work with rescue dogs. They didn't need to add all the extra bits. There's that. It's difficult. And again, going back to the shop example, if somebody comes over to single you out to make this comment and then walk away, they also leave you with all these other shoppers just staring at you. And it then again, you just think, I just wanted to do my shopping. I just came in here for salad. Now everyone's staring at me. Somebody's come over, a stranger has come over and said that, oh, look at all of these amazing things you've done despite being the way you are. It's an uncomfortable situation. And I know that it comes from a nice place. It comes from a well-meaning place, but it is a form of positive discrimination, because you're actively singling out the only disabled person you can see to go and make a point of interacting with them and saying all of these things. You don't say it to anyone else in the shop. So
Well,
that's an example of positive discrimination.
I I wasn't sure exactly how it is defined in in the Equality Act. So I looked it up, and I want to share with you that because I think we should know a little bit. Um,
Yeah.
so in 2010, the Equality Act offers no definition of positive discrimination, so it doesn't put any points there. It essentially refers to automatic favoring without proper consideration of merit of underrepresented individual from minority groups over individuals in minority group. Put another way, it refers to the preferential treatment of group of people of other because they possess or protected characteristics. Now, the act in 2010 has 9 characteristics. It defines age, disability, gender reassignment, marriage and civil partnership, pregnancy, maternity, race, religion or belief, sex or sexual orientation. And so I think we should kind of become a little bit more aware where this gray zone is. And even though it is not clearly defined, I think we should, let's call it this way, put our morals and ethics in place. And
Yeah.
what do you
And
think?
I think, quite simply, think before you act or think before you speak. But again, positive discrimination is a difficult one, because it's not just it's not black and white. It's very much a grey area, because I gave you an example of a negative experience from positive discrimination in a shop, but an example of a good experience because of positive discrimination is that I went to the Harry Potter studios in London, and that day I was using my wheelchair to be able to. I have a very limited amount of energy, and I needed to be able to get around the whole thing, the whole tour. So I went in my wheelchair that day. And an example of positive discrimination is that before the tour began, a member of staff came over. They'd seen me in my wheelchair. They came straight over and said, "We're going to start the tour in a minute. Would you mind coming to the front so that A, people don't trample you on their way in their excitement, and B, we can ensure that you can see clearly, because you're obviously in a wheelchair and you're staring at lots of people's bottoms." So they put you at the front. And that was actually fantastic, because I didn't have to go looking for a member of staff to ask them, when they start this tour, could I be at the front, please? They actually came and found me, and they'd pre-thought it out, and they'd said, these are the measures we've got in place. We've already clocked you in the chair. Come and be at the front so that you can get in first and you have a clear picture before all these bottoms swarm ahead of you, sort of thing. So that was a really good, I was really pleased, and I felt that my needs were being met as a disabled person because they'd seen me, they'd thought about me, and they'd already thought about this situation, and they were so well practiced, because they were fantastic the whole way through. So that's, again, positive discrimination, because they singled me out for being in a wheelchair, but they did it for my benefit.
Right.
So it was a really good experience.
So as professional, let's give it an example. I worked in the a couple of weeks ago with a person, with a couple that A had a specific sexual orientation, and B, one of them had disabilities, hearing disabilities. So I was aware of that, so I prepared kind of my stuff, and I enabled a feature on my online session, on my online Zoom, to have closed capturing plus a script. Like, I purchased an app that actually gives me a transcript of the whole thing. And
Oh,
when
wow.
when we were talking about, and it our conversation inspired me, by the way,
Fab.
to be a little bit more
Great.
aware of stuff. We learn. And I said, you know what? I learned about those people, and I said, what options do I have available now to be able to help them? And then I asked the questions: what is easier for you? How do you want me to put the session together? And then one of the people got up and says, I need to grab my ear, my how you call this device?
Ear defenders.
Exactly. And I was like, I have an option if that would be more helpful. I have a transcript. I was like, oh my God, that would be perfect.
Yeah.
Okay. Then I just pushed the button, and voila, here it was. So I think, what do you
Yeah.
think professionals should do when they deal, or how can they be prepared in a daily practice when offering the service to people with disabilities? What would your couple of things that you can recommend, other than the website, to be able to be functional for people who don't see well?
So, yeah, all of those examples that you gave are perfect because you'd thought about it, you put time in to think about other people and their needs and how you could meet them, or how you could adapt your course and your educational seminar to help people. And that's perfect. And I think this is really what we need to get out to education providers and sort of shops, stores, everything that disabled people come across in their life, in their normal daily life. And this is why I want to do these videos, just to kind of give people examples and hints and tips, so that when they go to next design a website or a course or anything, they think, oh yeah, transcripts, and it becomes second nature to just add them in, and think of everyone and think of others. And this is sort of why I want to do all these talks and provide education and get people to ask me questions. But again, so you're saying 2 examples for sight impairment. So Harry Potter World was a good example because they found me and said, would you like to sit at the front of the tour? Because I was in a chair.
There was always a question. It wasn't an assumption.
No. So it was would this action that we can provide help you? And I think that is the question that people should be asking, is there something I can be doing to help you or enable you or adapt something for you? And that's the questions that we need to be asking, because the worst a person will say is, no, thank you, I can manage. That's fine. But it shows that you've made the effort.
A simple thing is consent.
Yeah.
Like, hey, I'm having options to help you. Which one do you want? I don't need any. Good. I appreciate your question, though. And the game is over. Instead of pushing you my method so I feel good that I have something for people with disabilities, and just face it, deal with it. No, I don't have to.
Yeah, and that's it. And I think consent, as you say, is the good word. So another example, rather than assume, if somebody's in a wheelchair near a road, don't just rush over and say, here you are, I'm helping you, and push them to the other side of the road, because for all you know, they've just spent 20 minutes trying to cross that road and they just got to where they wanted to be, and you've just put them back again without asking, without saying, do you need help over the road? And it can happen in a chair, it can happen with a guide cane. Sometimes people try to carry me across the road with them, and then they pat themselves on the back and say, you're welcome, and walk off. And you think, I wasn't trying to cross the road, but now here I am on the wrong side. And I know that it happens to a lot of visually impaired people and a lot of people who use chairs. Sort of heroes step in and they push you across and then they leave without ever actually asking, did you need to get to that side of the road? So consent, as you say, to ask rather than assume, is a brilliant thing that educational providers can be doing, or anyone, actually, members of the public, that'd be great. And in terms of sight impairment, so as you say, my second suggestion would probably be, again, if you're providing coursework, ask if anybody needs anything before you attend the course. So if it's an in-person course, just have maybe something on your website or your sort of introductory information you send out saying, if anybody has any additional requirements, i.e. large print font on handouts, blue backgrounds, which is, you know, for things like dyslexia and visual impairments, and you can say, or saying, we can provide a transcript of the PowerPoint, or we can provide pictures printed out of the PowerPoint, things like that. It's just including it in your introductory paperwork.
Work sexier than a squirrel.
Yep, definitely.
Right.
An accessible squirrel.
Right. In concept with when we talked about consent, I recognize that many people wonder, people who have dogs with as a service dog, and they wonder, do the dogs have any out time, or are they consistently on the job?
Yeah, that's a very common question and a very common assumption, because unfortunately I have experienced being out in public with my working dog, and I was just sat on a table minding my own business, and there was a lady who was sat behind me, and she made a point of, she kept leaning over and they go and tutting and shaking her head, and then eventually she announced very loudly into the room, such a shame that working dogs are forced to work all their life. She didn't actually engage in in conversation with me. She didn't say, can I ask a question about your dog? Does it have any off-duty time, I'm wondering? Or anything like that. She didn't ask about her workload, his workload. She didn't ask anything about my actual dog or what happens in a day-to-day life for a working dog. She just assumed. And unfortunately, if she'd asked, we could have opened up a conversation about it and I could have educated her. Instead, right. She made an ableist, closed-minded assumption loudly and offered it to the whole room.
Basically accusing you of abusing your dog, just straightforward.
Yeah. And you do get comments. You get comments like, if you can't look after yourself, why should a dog have to look after you? You do get comments like that. You get people making hurtful statements and assumptions. If they came up to me and said, can I ask what your dog's work-life balance is? Is that such a thing for an assistance dog? I would say to them, yeah, actually, the time that you see her in public is a very short amount of time, because I'm not allowed to overwork her. That's even in our contract from our organization. They're very strict about how much and how little you can do with your dogs. Too little and your dog can start to maybe not have practice in public, because it's as with any behavior, if you're teaching something, use it or lose it. So you very much need to practice and keep on top of training. Training for these dogs never ceases. There's no expiry point. There's no end point. It's always a constant fluid. You work on one thing, then you go back to another thing, and you're constantly refreshing. And every time you go into public, there's a different situation. It's never the same thing. So you're constantly learning together. But too much workload and your dog will become exhausted, and there will be fallout. They'll start to maybe be sloppy in their work, or they'll show discomfort or nervousness or be overtired. And that's why it's really important that they do have time off. So as I say, my working dog goes to a dog walker to just be a dog and play with other dogs and roll in mud and come back filthy and covered in fox poo. I wish people knew how many times I've had to wash fox poo off of her before putting on her working jacket and going to work with her, because she's had the time to be a normal dog.
Right.
And again,
I
people kind of, sorry, just quick.
no.
When
Finish up.
people see her working in public, the longest that she's ever worked in public is 4 hours, and in that time she has toilet breaks, rest breaks, water breaks, and we have time out where I'll find a patch of grass and just let her sniff, just to process and unwind and unload her bucket again if she's been working really hard. There's so much to working a working dog, and that includes plenty of breaks and rest and giving them time to process and sniff and just kind of shake it all off and start again. And they're just like us. They need regular breaks and comfort breaks. And when she's at home, some people think that she works at home wearing all of her gear and her vest and her jacket, and she doesn't.
No, it takes me an hour to get them on it every day.
I know. She wears it from morning till night, apart from when she's rolling in fox poo. No, so when she's at home, when the vest is off, she's a normal dog. She jumps on the sofas, she's just a normal dog. She does zoomies in the garden. She digs up the flower bed. And there's people see her at work and they see her for that very short snapshot of time and think that's all she ever does with her life. And actually, they don't know how many holes we've got in our flower bed because she's being a normal dog when she gets home. And she likes to bury balls and bones and chewies, and she's just a normal dog at home. Yes, she does tasks, but she has a pretty good life, really. There's so much extra training and play that we do. And whereas pet dogs maybe do sit down and roll over, the only difference is that she's doing picking up tasks, undoing my laces, helping me dress and undress in the mornings, and it's all a game to her. So yes, she is a working dog, but she loves her job, because if she didn't, you couldn't force a dog to do it. It wouldn't be ethical, and she wouldn't pass the exams.
Well, hold on. Let's talk about it a little bit, because it's something that bothers me really, and it's really hard to talk about it. And I'm directing my voice towards the people who think the other way. They think the dog has to support me because I have disabilities, or I want my dog to perform a certain way, and if I don't get it the normal way, I'm going to use a prong collar, a shock collar, a choke collar to get it done. I use fear tactics to force the dog to be of service. And if you point it out, then it gets you a backlash, because all of a sudden people kind of come up at you like hyenas and how dare you speaking up to a person with disabilities. Like, clearly the person is abusing the dog. I don't care what you have. Don't do that to your dog, because he has disabilities, you have disabilities, and you should know better how it feels like to be in a difficult position, being forced to do things you don't want to do. So how can we convey that information to those people? What can we do to help people raise that awareness that, yes, you can train your own dog, but it doesn't mean you train your dog. You have to train also yourself to be aware of those needs of your dog that needs to be met. And the more an ethical, frame that you have to work on a dog, because a dog does not have any obligations to support you. It's supposed to be a game and a play thing, a situation that he would willingly do for you because of your type of relationship you have. What do you think?
Yeah, all of that. And sometimes the truth isn't always a popular opinion, but I feel the same way that you do. I wouldn't. So my dog and I, sorry, I keep looking over her. I've realized that I'm looking in that direction. It's because I'm looking at her, because she's lovely. No, we have a working partnership. It's not a dictatorship. I don't say jump and she says how high, or yes, master. It's not that way. She helps me because she wants to, and she likes it, and it's a game. But there's no obligation for her to work. And it's up to me as her handler to be her advocate as well. And if she's having an off day, or she's not feeling well, or she's just not herself, or she's tired, I will leave her at home and take a human carer. Or maybe I won't go somewhere that day. Or maybe I will adapt the day that I planned to meet her needs. Like if it's too hot, to take her out and work her. So although, yes, she helps me, I am also her biggest advocate, and I will never put her in a position where she feels that she's forced to work. Because if your dog feels that they're forced to do something, you're doing it wrong. There's a fundamental problem there in your working partnership if you're forcing your dog to work.
Well, there is a confusion there what force is, because people think, using a shock collar is totally humane.
It's sometimes people argue that if they're disabled, they need to use these maybe more forceful tactics to train their dog because their communication isn't going to be as clear, or maybe they need to rely on them for various other reasons. But I personally would never use them, because I think if you're getting to that point, then some of the fundamental basics there aren't working, and it's either you need to skill up as a trainer, or you need to understand that your dog is saying no to a specific task for a reason. So maybe if they're not doing something you're asking them to, look at them. Are they saying no as a dog because they're distracted by something over there, and you need to work on their distractions, or maybe their prey drive? Are they saying no because actually they're not comfortable with what you're asking them to do? Maybe they're scared, or they're a bit anxious and they're not sure yet. So you need to take it back a level, and you need to work on confidence before you ask for that again. Or maybe they're saying no because they're in pain, or there's some underlying issue that you're not seeing. And yes, you could put a prong collar on to make all of those things happen and make that task happen, but you're not listening to your dog. If they're saying no, they're not saying no to spite you. And that's, I think, something people need to maybe look at more. In the UK, we do have what's called AD UK, so Assistance Dogs UK. And it's a coalition of, I think, 7 or 8 charities. And they, for many years, they were the charities that provided fully trained assistance dogs to disabled handlers. They do not allow the use of shock or prong collars. They do not allow the use of choke chains or check chains, whichever you like to call them. And my kind of argument for that is that actually, if these UK charities have not used prong collars or electric collars and never have done, then there's no reason to do it as an owner trainer, really. If these kind of top behaviorists and trainers don't need to use them to achieve these results with assistance dogs, there's a reason. So maybe if you, as an owner trainer or whoever you are, it may not be an owner trainer, but if you feel the need to do that, then maybe there's actually something wrong with your partnership specifically, or the training handling methods, or the trainer's skills, or the dog's temperament. Maybe they're saying no because they're not suited for the job. And as their handler, it's your responsibility to be aware of this and sort of address whatever the issue is, rather than just put a shock collar on to put a plaster over whatever is going on under the surface. Sorry, right. That was sort of a ramble, wasn't it?
No, that's fine. We need just to speak up for those dogs, because they cannot talk for themselves. And as a training professional, it's kind of like a slippery slope. I have many people calling me and says, "Hey, I want to train my own service dog." I was like, "Great, I think that's a great idea. Let's talk about what do you need to know about it." I was like, "No, you come and train my dog." Like, it's not working that way. And I also see very often, also in groups, where people suggest, the dog, because they have a Great Dane, because of their mobility issues, they need to, pull up the dog, and then they have to take the dog for a walk, and then all of a sudden, well, the dog sees a cat, and up he goes, and everybody says, well, you use a prong collar, right? That's what you do, or you use a head halter because that's what you do, but not recognizing that, hey, there is a problem in the system. Just because I want my dog to perform a certain way and my dog is not capable of working that way, I have to understand what the dog's limitations is, and I cannot just push it, because it's kind of like a balloon. If you push there, somewhere else has to go something out. So if I push the dog to go beyond his limit and on his emotional threshold, and then push that button and the dog gets over threshold, and then I'm expecting the dog to perform otherwise generally fine, it's not going to happen. There's always a side effect. And so, yeah, I know people who had 3 dogs as a service dogs, because each dog did a specific thing very specifically and didn't try to push one agenda on one particular dog.
So, perfect example is I actually have, and I know I've told him about you before in a previous video, when I had my head injury, my 14-week-old Jack Russell grew up with me becoming disabled and living as a disabled person with all these seizures. And by a year old, he had taught himself a natural seizure alert. And that's how I ended up looking at this dog and thinking, how are you doing this? How are you working for me and picking up on this from me? And so that's what got me into assistance dogs and researching it and finding out about this world that I didn't know existed. But having said that, yes, he has never once, he's 9 years old, in the 9 years I've had him, he has never once missed a seizure alert or got it wrong. Does that make him an assistance dog? No. And when I found out about owner training and things initially, I started thinking, oh, maybe I could train him to be an assistance dog. And we tried it and we took him out. And in some areas he was really good. But I actually withdrew him from the training, and I withdrew him because there were elements that I saw that actually he wasn't comfortable with, like sitting on a bus. So getting on the bus was the bit where he felt anxious. So I knew I had to work with that with him. And we could put the time in and work through that. But is that for my benefit or his? And then
that's exactly the question. Who's really benefiting from it? Just only the person? What about the dog?
So yes, he could task, and he did help me, and he mitigated my disability, but was he suitable? No. And actually, the thing that was the final straw was we were walking along a village, just a normal path, and a dog came out of the garden and grabbed him and attacked him when he was wearing his little in-training vest. And this dog really had a go at my dog, and he completely unprovoked, and he had a go at him. And once he was recovered and healed, I picked up the in-training vest and showed it to him and thought we could try training again. And he told me in no certain circumstances, it was no uncertain terms, he did not want to wear that vest. Now, yes, he'd been attacked in it, and maybe I could have worked through this vest and desensitized him and got him back to wearing it. But I looked at this dog hiding under my bed, and I looked at this jacket, and I thought, this isn't his lifestyle for him. It's not suitable for him. He's telling me no, and I need to accept that that's okay. And that was the end of his training journey. It was a very short training journey. But just because he could task and he helped me didn't mean it was right for him. Mm-hmm. And actually, that's how I've ended up with my second dog, who loves the job and is suited in every way. But sure again, it's about being an advocate.
Yeah. I'm sure your dogs are super cute. And have people ask you, like, hey, can I take a picture of your cute dogs?
This one happens so much.
How do you feel about it? I mean, I was like, dude, I don't want to take a picture. So how do you feel about it?
Yeah, and I know when I sent it to you, it was probably I sent it to you as a bullet point as something I wanted to talk about, and you maybe saw it and thought, that's a bit weird. But yes, it happens. It doesn't just happen to me, it happens to pretty much all of the assistance dog handlers I know. They will catch somebody raising up their phone and taking like a sneaky picture of them, or they will run up and very blatantly get their camera and go like this and take their picture of them whilst they're stood there with their dog. And for me, not only is it a massive invasion of my privacy, because I am a private person, I don't have Instagram, I don't do Twitter, I just about manage Facebook, and I don't plaster my pictures all over the internet, so I don't want a stranger to do that either. And they don't ask, you see them taking a sneaky photo. And again, it's discrimination, because I don't see them anywhere else. I don't see them taking pictures of other strangers. It's just me, the disabled person.
If you have disabilities, you may not see the person taking a picture of you. And then you hear from your sister, like, hey, you were in the store today? You didn't tell me about it. And like, which store are you talking about?
And what really annoys me is, because obviously I have a white guide cane, people can clearly see that I have a visual impairment. And so unfortunately, they don't understand what level of sight I have. They don't understand that I have remaining residual vision. So yes, I can see them to an extent of what they're doing, but they assume I can't see anything at all, and therefore I can't see them or what they're doing. So I'll walk up and just click, and they think I can't see. And I know that happens to other visually impaired individuals, and it just it's upsetting for me because I just think you're not doing it to anyone else, and you wouldn't like it if somebody did it to you, just walked up and started taking your picture as
Yeah,
you
try to
walked
get up
around
in
the
the
shop.
store, in a restaurant, take a picture of a guy sitting with his child.
No, you
I want to
wouldn't.
see
You
that
wouldn't.
picture.
You would. There would be repercussions and consequences, but
Right, right.
apparently, because you do it to a disabled person, it's okay. And some people just don't get this, and they say, "Well, what's the problem? If you're out in public, surely people can take your picture, you know." And the legality of it is that if you're in a public space, yeah, technically people can take your picture. However, morally and ethically, they shouldn't. And
Yeah.
my argument for this would be, you're taking a picture of a stranger and you don't know anything about this stranger. You don't know their history, you don't know their background, and for all you know, this person could be escaping domestic violence. And maybe they've set up somewhere and they have a new life. You don't know their historic traumas. You don't know anything about them, but by taking this picture and putting it on the internet, you could be putting them in danger.
You know, I just get goosebumps about it. I mean, I work with people who are coming out from domestic violence, and I have to be very careful how I handle things. And even though I have in my questionnaire a clear definition, are you okay with sharing things publicly? And they say no, that's it. I'm not even questioning that. That's their choice. Even though I ask every time, we do something, do you want your progress to be public? And they always have to click no. If you click once no, it's always no.
Yeah.
Until you definitely tell me yes, right? Um, I also recognize. I mean, I like to take pictures of dogs. I like to take pictures of dogs who usually being accused of being violent, and I was like, you see that this dog is a service dog. I'm gonna go to the person and say, sorry, I'm a dog trainer, I would love to take a picture of your dog. Is it okay with you to share it publicly, because I want to show that your breed is capable of being a service dog? And people says yeah, and then ask questions like, what's your dog's name? And so is it okay to share your name so I can share a little bit of a story? So we have a conversation. I'm just not taking a picture and post it on Facebook, showing how cute I am, posting a picture or being aware of those things. And I think that's a great point also you shared about people who are in domestic violence cases and they need to be silent and incognito on certain times. Um, And it's a
And it,
distraction. When you're working with your dog and all of a sudden you have these kids coming around, mommy, mommy, can I pet the dog? Like, get
yeah,
away from me.
it happens every time. In fact, no matter where I'm going, I always add an additional 10 to 20 minutes, regardless of whether I'm spending the day out or if I'm trying to get to a meeting or something important. I will always allow at least 10 to 20 minutes extra time to allow for the people who will stop, or maybe they will do drive-by petting as I go past, or so I have to then refocus my dog. She's pretty good. She ignores them now because they can be sort of this close away from her and she'll still just look at me unless I tell her she can say hi. But again, it's still people. Even if I just want to go from A to B and do something quickly, I have to allow extra time because I know people will come and approach me and want to talk about my dog, and that's actually fine. I will happily spend 10 to 20 minutes educating people and answering their questions. But what does upset me is when people just run over and touch her, or she's in the way, so they just push her, or they do something sort of invasive to her and to me in our personal space, and there's no communication or consent. They just touch her, and
And
it's a
it's not just
distraction.
regular people with kids. I mean, I know people who have dogs who kind of like, I can kind of see there in their eyes, they try to challenge that dog. Oh, my dog is
Yeah,
friendly with other dogs. I don't care what your dog is. Stay away from my service dog.
it's amazing. It's amazing to me how many fully grown adults like to spend their time barking at my dog to try and distract her. And luckily, my dog also thinks it's kind of bemusing and stares at them and sort of thinks, "Are you okay?" And she's not going to go, "Oh, there's a
Yeah,
person
you need
barking
this.
at me. I need to go and see them." Luckily, she looks at them in the same way I'm going and sort of going, "Seriously? Are you okay? You're barking at a dog." But people do. They try and it's almost like they see it as a challenge to distract your dog and then go, "Your dog was distracted. I win." You think, well, what
Yeah.
did you win? Really? What did you get from that situation? What was the purpose of this
Well,
interaction?
I need to point something out because we talked about a little bit before about using aversion for those dogs. Doing that to dogs and service dogs and putting the handler exposed to a trigger. What if that dog is triggered? What dog is you kind of push the right button and the dog is triggered and pulls that person over? What would you say? I'm sorry?
It's
Like you go
people don't
home and tell your
understand.
mom, "Hey mom, I was great. I'm so proud to be your son because right now I managed for a dog to pull his handler over because I was just a jerk about it."
Yeah, you do though. You wonder what people get out of this situation and this experience, and why
It's
they
kind of like
why
something
they
is
need to do
there to
it.
make them do it. Like their little devil. Like, "Hey, just please."
And do you know the worst ones are the ones who actually come across as entitled. So they will come up to me and touch my dog, and I'll say, "Please don't touch my dog. She's working." And they justify it by saying, "It's okay. I'm a puppy raiser for this other charity." And you say, "Well,"
Can I have the phone number, please?
and you think, "Well, then you should know better, shouldn't you? That doesn't exclude you from this do not touch, do not distract. If anything, you should know more than anyone why it's so important that we don't distract these working dogs. You don't, it doesn't mean you're an exempt VIP and you can touch any assistance dog." It just baffles me.
Well, I can tell you from my experience as a trainer, working with other colleagues, how many times I heard, "Oh, I'm a trainer." Yes, but you don't know this dog. Just because you have boyfriends or girlfriends to your entire life doesn't make you a gynecologist. Like, don't make that assumption. And it's okay.
It's strange, isn't it? You wouldn't go up to somebody's child in public and pat them on the head. And if somebody said, "What are
Yeah,
you doing?" you would say, "It's all right,
here.
I'm a parent too."
Or do it to
Okay.
your car. You go up to somebody's car. "Oh my God, I love your mirrors."
It's very strange, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, I remember you telling me a story um, about a girl and a stick. Tell me
So
about that a little bit.
I just wanted to include this story because it's a real interaction that happened. And actually, I've just spent the last hour saying, "Don't do this, don't do that. This is what I hate," and having a bit of a rant. And so I just wanted to tell you this story because it just makes me laugh every time I think about it. And actually, this is the reason I go out and I visit schools and I do these talks and education and I answer questions, because I find that actually children, if you can interact with them and talk to them about assistance dogs, they're like sponges and they retain it. And the next time you see them, they'll go, "Don't touch the dog because it's working." And if you can get them on side, it's fantastic. But this little girl, it was probably about 2 weeks ago, and I just wanted cheese. That's all I wanted. I was just popping to the village shop. So I threw on the dog's jacket. We went marching down to the shop before it closed. And I just got to the crossing just before the shop. And I was just about to cross, and I heard, "What does that do?" And I turned around, and there was this little girl, and she was maybe about 8 or 9, staring at me. And it was a sort of expectant, there she was. And I said, "Sorry." She said, "What does that do?" and pointed at my stick. And I said, "Oh, this is a guide cane, because I can't see." And she said, "Why?" So I explained why I couldn't see, and she said, "Why?" So I explained why I couldn't do that. And it just stemmed from there. And every time I thought I was getting to the end of her question, she'd go, "What does the dog do?" And I was sort of going, "I really need to get the cheese." But this was such a good opportunity to educate her that I didn't
It's
mind all
totally
these
worth losing
questions.
the cheese, damn it.
But I could see the shop. It was just over the road. But I had this very expectant child asking me at least 40 questions. So I left the house at 6 o'clock. It's a 10-minute trip to the shop. I didn't get back until after 7 o'clock because I'd spent so much time with this girl. And the funniest bit was I ran through what the dog does. I showed her some tasking. She then asked me what was in the contents of my bag. So I showed her what was in the contents of my dog training bag. She wanted to see the documentation I have for my dog. So I showed it all to her, including my printed out Equality Guide 2010. She flipped through it, asking me loads of questions. And I was saying, "Right, I am going to go and get the cheese now." And every time I'd say that, she'd go, What's in that bag? What does this do? What's this? How did your dog do this? Um, and it was just really, it's funny, but it was such a funny interaction, and it was a positive interaction. These are the ones that I enjoy, because she'd also...
These are real questions. They're not questions to fill up time or wasting your time. Like, really, I'm really curious what's in your bag.
Yeah,
what
and she was
going
genuinely...
on in your head?
Yeah, she genuinely wanted to know why I had dog treats in my bag and what they were for. And so I explained that I pay my dog for working, and we explained very kind of to her level the concept of treating and reinforcing behaviours and how I'm paying her for her work. And anyway, then she said, and she kept saying, she'd ask a question, and then she'd say, I'm sorry, I asked too many questions. My mum says I ask too many questions, but I just want to know everything. And every time I say, that's okay, I don't mind. I like explaining this to people. Anyway, then her small friend joined. And at this point she went, this is Liz, and she has a dog called River, and this dog works, and it does this and this and this and this. And she reeled off every single thing I told her. And I thought, fantastic, her friends arrived. Now I can go and get my cheese. Because I was sort of, drumming my fingers. The dog was looking at me going, why are we still here? Anyway, her little friend then turned around and went, can you swim? And it started all over again.
No, this was the wrong question.
And it started because he'd seen my guide cane. He knew I was blind. And then he wanted to know if I could swim. So I explained, yes, I could. And then he said, do you go to the cinema? And I wanted to know, and I said, yes. And he said, do you watch the telly? Yes. It's not the same experience you have. It's a different experience visually. But yes, I do watch the TV. And anyway, and then a third friend joined. And it went on and on. At this point, I was going, please let me go and get the cheese. The shop is there. I am here. I just need to get the cheese. And it was just brilliant. And the final thing, and the reason, the funniest thing was that when this girl was asking me all of these questions, in the end, I just said to her, right, this is my stick, have a go with it. And I handed her my guide cane, and I said, do you feel the different textures? Can you have a go, like moving it side to side? Can you feel it on the road and the surfaces? And she was really into it. But the funniest thing was this little girl went up the road with my stick, swinging it side to side as I'd shown her. And suddenly all these adults ripped back their curtains and were having a look, and then came and stood on their porch, because this little girl, who they all knew, was wandering past with a blind person's cane, and they couldn't see me. And it was just the funniest thing, because they couldn't understand where this girl had suddenly got this stick. And they were probably thinking, oh no, she's mugged somebody and she's taken their stick. And you could see the panic with all these adults suddenly appeared on their doorsteps watching the situation and seeing what was happening. And it made me laugh.
It is so amazing.
Yeah, it was
I mean, in this short period of time that we're talking here, I mean, we talked for an hour, but in this little time you had this cheese and stick experience with this girl. She learned probably more that she would learn in her entire life in such a short period of time, just being able to ask questions. And I'm taking that example to tell dogs who are service dogs who learn to become service dogs, have also a lot of questions. And we need to answer those questions as handlers and as trainers. The dog wants to know what is in your bag. Okay, let him smell it, what's in your bag. What's wrong with it? He wants to smell where you went before. Who did you touch? These are part of enrichments. And I think enrichment is also important when we have dogs, because it's also part for helping them being balanced and in harmony with the environment. And we don't give them that option. It's like those little children. They just want to learn and then become obsessive about it. So
yeah.
Thank you for taking time for that.
Well, it was just, as I kept saying to her, she kept apologizing for asking questions. And I was saying to her, don't apologize. Really don't apologize. I don't mind. I like telling people, if they're willing to ask and learn, I will talk to them for as long as they like, as long as I don't have any cheese to buy. But it was such a positive experience and interaction. And I know that story will stay with me for a while, because every time I think about it, I end up smiling and laughing about it, because it was just...
Definitely. Every time I will go shopping for cheese, That is kind of already stick to my head.
And it was even things like it got to the point when I was emptying my bag to show her what was in my bag. She saw my phone and she said, "But you're blind, you don't, and you have a phone." And I then had to show her, my adaptive technology and my giant apps, and how I use my magnification thing and my text to speech reader that reads things for me. And she was just completely immersed in everything I was telling her. And I knew this because when her friends turned up, she immediately reeled off every single thing that I had told her to this boy. And then
Yeah,
he
these are
turned
so
up, and it was,
sponging all this information, right?
yeah. And that's, to me, that is worth taking an hour when it should have taken 10 minutes to buy cheese. But that was worth me taking time out of my day to educate her because she wanted to know. And if I can explain it to her now, and I know that she'll remember that because she was so kind of immersed in all of it and just took it all in. She was like a sponge taking it all in. But I know that if I can sort of educate one child or all three in that situation in the end, and they have that experience to talk to me without sort of embarrassment or what can I say, what can I not say that adults do, she'll remember that. And the next time she sees somebody who's visually impaired, she will know not to touch the dog, not to distract it, not to drop food on the floor, to tempt them over, why they're working. And she'll understand how the stick works. And there's so much information that she'll retain, and that will be beneficial to other people. And
Man,
that's why I like doing this.
we talk for an hour and we talk about so many things, and I have seen like thousands of questions left. Um, you guys who are watching, I don't know where you guys are watching from. How about you kind of chime in a little bit? Um, how do you feel about our conversation today? What did you learn? What is your takeaway from our conversation today? Maybe put in a little sentence for people to recognize, like, hey, this is a video I should watch. And I know from a reality check that one child can affect his parents and his two sides grandparents. So if we educate more children, more people will learn than me teaching an adult and the adult only talks about it to one person.
Yeah,
And
and
I
I
think
hope
that's amazing what you do with, educating children, taking that time.
I genuinely hope that girl went home and said, "Mum, I just met this person," and reeled off all the information, rather than her having an experience where she went home and said, "I tried to talk to somebody and they snapped at me not to touch my dog, and then they walked off and ignored me." Because that would have built, again, a perception in her head that I was a blind person. And if I'd snapped her and said, "Don't touch my dog," and walked off, that would have been
Yeah,
a
yeah.
really negative interaction for her. So I'm
Well,
hoping that the interaction we
parents,
had was a positive one.
but parents don't educate the children either because they don't know either.
No.
So I see people who watch us today. You should share that video because some people have no clue. I didn't have a clue until I learned about it, and I was embarrassed. And you didn't have a clue, and until you got
No.
into that situation, and then you're like, "Holy bark!" There's
Yeah.
more lots of things that I cannot do and I have to do, and people don't know about things that I have to deal with. Wow, that was cool. I so appreciate you today. I know it's late evening in UK, right?
Yeah, it's getting that way. We're losing the light more and more now. It's winter, but
So while you're having done with your tea, I barely had coffee this morning.
oh wow.
So
Oh,
thank you so much for today. I think it's worth having a continuous conversation. Maybe you guys who watch that video and you have any questions, are like, hey, you guys, you didn't touch that thing. Maybe we can talk about that thing
yeah,
and answer
always.
questions.
Again, if you've ever
And
got questions, even if it's like, "Do you watch TV?" Just ask it because I'll answer.
yeah, right.
Yeah,
Without you
just
being
put it in the
blamed, I'm like,
comments.
you don't ask these questions. Of course she's blind. She doesn't see a TV. Really.
Yeah, no, seriously, just if there's ever been a question, like a burning question you've always wanted to ask, like a visually impaired person, now's the time.
I
So
remember
just
when I
pop it
was
in the
young in
comments.
school, I had to wake up very early. I had to have a 3 hour drive to my school with the train. So we could wake up 4 o'clock in the morning being at the train station. I had this little guy next to me. He was like a little bit older than me, and he was having his clock and was pushing against his eye. And I was like, what is he doing with his clock? He must have a problem or something like that. Why, if you have a clock, why don't you look at it? Why do you have to push it against your eye? And it was like for 3 months in a row, every day, almost like every weekday. So one day I said, I'm going to ask him any questions because I was burning inside. I need to know why he's pushing his. And he said, well, I can see the light on my reflective clock, so I know what time it is. But in order to do so, I have to be very close to it. I can see it at night, but if there is so much light in the room, I will not be able to see it. So I have to get very close and push it against my eye. And I felt so stupid. In reverse of these 3 months, I was blaming him for like, what is he doing there? It must be crazy or something. Like something so simple as that, you had no clue until you learned about it.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like you and I experienced, neither of us knew much about disabilities or health conditions or kind of stereotypes or all these ideas until you experienced it. And then our perception changed and our experiences changed. And now we can answer these questions that people have. But like I said at the beginning, if you don't have personal experience or experience through a friend or a relative, it's very unlikely you'll have the chance to interact and ask these questions and have that education.
Well, for everybody's questions, thank you so much. And yes, there is a recording, and you guys will watch it in a recording after it's completed. And maybe you want to subscribe or like or follow so you get updates the next time we have this awesome conversation with Liz. And of course, you can ask questions, and you want to tag Liz on those questions. If I see you're tagging her and you didn't tag, I will make sure she's tagged so she can answer your questions. Liz, thank you so much. And
It's
give
right. Thanks for having me
give
again.
your hugs to your dogs.
Yeah, will do. Thanks. Bye.
Talk to you soon. Bye bye.